everyone, this is Payanna and welcome to my channel, and in this video I'm going to be giving you my thoughts on Cassandra Clare's Mortal Instruments series. So I didn't pick up this series until now because I remember when it was going strong back in 2013, I think, quite a while ago, and there was a lot of kind of YA trashy romance fantasy stuff going around, and I just kind of assumed that it would be the same thing as all of that and didn't really care for it. But this series is still hugely popular. Even now, I see it all over Bookstagram. People still talk about it on BookTube. It's still really popular today, and I just wanted to find out what all the fuss was about. So when I started reading the first book, City of Bones, I really didn't think I was going to like it because I was thinking, this is YA, I'm too old for this. I honestly didn't think I was going to like it, but I did. I loved it. This is a YA fantasy series about a race of people called shadow hunters who have been given magical powers by an angel in order to protect the human world against demons. And it follows the story of a 16-year-old girl called Clary who comes across a group of shadow hunters one day, and she can see them, and she isn't supposed to see them, and she finds out that her mother was a shadow hunter who went into exile after her father did some weird stuff, not very nice stuff. And so upon meeting these group of shadow hunters, or a group of teenagers like her, they're between 16 and 18, they are two siblings known as Isabel and Alec, and their kind of foster brother who's called Jace. Following this encounter, Clary is propelled at a great speed into the world of the shadow hunters, and that's one thing I liked about this series. It does not hang around. Everything happens really quickly, and sometimes it can be, I find that very annoying, but here it's like it kind of goes along at a very kind of fast but intriguing pace. Like, I didn't find it overwhelming at any point, and I didn't think that it was lacking in any description. It all happens very fluidly. So Clary finds out that there are werewolves and vampires and fairies and mermaids and a myriad of other different species of magical creatures all living in her hometown in New York, and it's wonderful. The world building in this is brilliant. It's so good. The way all these different races have their own societies and how they organize themselves and how they have like legal kind of contracts with each other to keep out of each other's way and not have insanely massive wars that might impact on the human world. It's all about keeping the humans safe, right? All the rest, yeah. And the shadow hunters are under threat from a man called Valentine, who is in fact Clary's father, who everyone thought was dead, and he's come back to try and get revenge and carry on doing the bad things he was doing before she was born. There are 6 books in this series, so it's quite a decent sized series. And it's hard, right, to keep a series kind of going and keep it all coherent and keep it all like flowing quite nicely. But Cassandra Clare, I thought, did that really well. Everything works. There wasn't really anything that I had an issue with, not with the plot line, apart from maybe, there were a few things that bothered me, like, for example, the love stories in this. There's quite a bit of romance. Clary gets intertwined with Jace very quickly, and the love at first sight thing is something that always annoys me. I've never ever read a novel where I thought that it made sense or that it worked, and it's a pretty common thing in YA novels that characters kind of fall desperately in love with each other and they're completely obsessed with each other and they want to spend the rest of their lives together, like from a very early stage in their relationship. It really annoys me because it kind of perpetuates this idea that it can happen in real life. And in my experience, it doesn't really work out, because you do meet these people sometimes that you just completely fall in love with. Usually they're people who are very like you. And I've come across people like that who are exactly like me and we agree on everything and it's all wonderful. But very kind of soon it transpires that they're not I mean, for me at least, they wouldn't be the ideal partner, because it does feel really good to have someone that kind of validates your existence and everything that you think and everything that you believe and everything you like. But it very soon gets boring, because these people, like, there's really no excitement with them or no surprises with them. And even so, like, love, especially love that is that strong, is something that grows over time. It doesn't really happen overnight. So with Jace and Clary, I just didn't like their relationship. I didn't like Jace, to be honest. He was one of the characters that I just really couldn't get my head around. And I mean, I understand why he is the way he is, because he's got a very complicated past that he still hasn't kind of worked out yet. There's a lot of complicated kind of storylines involving Jace's past. So I understand that he's kind of confused, and he's 16 years old, he doesn't know where he is, and he kind of hides behind this mask of being this really badass warrior, and being like really pretentious, and I didn't like him. I just kept thinking, Clary, you can do better than that. So yeah. The other love story that I couldn't really get to grips with was Alec, the older brother, has a relationship with a warlock called Magnus, and I really loved Magnus. I really loved his character. He's funny, he is witty, I thought he was really good. And I was actually really happy when you find out that Alec and him are having a relationship, because Alec tried to keep it hidden from everyone, but then it sort of comes out one day. And I really liked it. I thought, yeah, that's fun for these two to be together. They're very different. They've got very different personalities. They're very different people. And I thought it was cute. But very quickly, it kind of gets weird, because Alec is mortal and Magnus is immortal. And Alec kind of goes through this weird kind of scheme where he's trying to turn Magnus mortal so that they can grow old and die together. And I thought that was really odd, because at this point they've only been together for like 5 or 6 months and they're already like, wow, I can't lose you. And to me it made no sense. I mean, it might make sense from Alec's point of view because he's 18, but Magnus is like several hundred years old and he's had a lot of other relationships in his life. So surely he of all people would know that you don't fall in love with someone that quickly. And that's another thing also in their relationship. There's this scene where Alec kind of goes insane because he meets one of Magnus's exes and he's like, you had other relationships before. He is several hundred years old. Of course he's had other relationships before you, Alec. Just, I don't know, Alec, and the worst thing is Alec always kind of comes across as being this very mature character, and I kind of liked him because he's sort of in between two worlds. Like, he's 18, so technically he's an adult, but he's also still kind of got a sort of dependent side to him, which I thought he was a very kind of well-constructed character. But this of him blowing up because his boyfriend has had other relationships before, that kind of broke the magic of this character for me. I thought, surely he's more sensible than that. So that was a bit disappointing. The one relationship that I did like, that I thought made complete sense, was Isabel's relationship with Clary's best friend, Simon. And they have this kind of weird on-off relationship where, like, Isabel doesn't really want to commit. I really loved Isabel's character. She was so good. She comes across as being this insanely badass girl, and she's always very, like, she always looks amazing. She's always got her hair done up in a brilliant way, makeup perfect, wonderful clothes to kind of put her to her best advantage. She comes across being very sexy, very powerful warrior. But, you know, stuff happens in the story that really affects her, and her armor starts breaking. Like, you start seeing cracks in this badass character. She starts having breakdowns, and she uses Simon to kind of console herself, and so he gets very confused about their relationship. He doesn't really know what's going on, and to me that made complete sense. It works for Isabel's character, it worked for Simon's character. So that was one relationship that the one relationship out of the three that I thought made complete sense and worked really well. But then the only point I was kind of happy about them all being at relationships was in the very end of book 6, when they're all kind of together standing around a lake and they're all like, oh, we're all happy now. And that's the only moment where I kind of felt good, like, oh, they're all in a relationship, that's sweet. But the rest of it was like, ugh. And that's the thing I found interesting. A lot of people compare this to Harry Potter. The one comparison I would make with Harry Potter would be just that, the kind of romantic relationships. Because in Harry Potter, they really have a time to grow, like Ron's love for Hermione and Harry Potter with Ginny. They occur over several years of these people knowing each other and spending time with each other and getting to be around each other. So it works. At the end, these romances completely work. The character of Valentine, like the bad guy, was... I had issues with him at first, but interestingly, he is taken out of the picture quite early on in this series, which actually surprised me. I was like, oh, okay, he's gone now, right? And the kind of role of the villain is taken over by his son, Sebastian, who is way superior than him as a villain. I thought he was brilliant. He is, so he's Clary's brother that she didn't know about. And what I liked about Sebastian is, like, he's supposed to be a sort of demon, but he, to some extent, is trying to be human. And that's what I really loved about his character. Like, he has this very peculiar attitude towards Clary. He kind of knows that he's supposed to have some feelings for her because she's his sister, and he knows that that means something, but he doesn't really know what the appropriate emotions and feelings are. And there's this kind of exploration of his character, especially in book 5, where Clary gets to spend quite a bit of time with him, which I thought was really, really interesting. So I didn't really like Valentine. Valentine's kind of this random bad guy that you get in YA novels, but Sebastian was really well constructed. I thought he was really good as a bad guy. Sebastian. A thing I found really good about this series was the fact that, all of the narrative is taking place around this group of people, Clary, Jace, Izzy, Alec and Simon. And so they're all kids apart from Alec, but who is kind of in between the two. But it's always very clear why they're acting on their own. That's always made very, very clear. They can't go to the adults because the adult shadow hunters have to answer to this organization called the Clave. And the Clave are very stuck in their own ways. They're very bureaucratical, and so they just can't go and see these people, either because it will take too long to get their plans approved, or because they'll just be shooed out the way because they're a bunch of kids. And I like that about this series, especially compared to the Oksa Pollock series, which I've already made a video about. I made a video about the first book. But at the end of the first Oksa Pollock book, Oksa has to go and save her grandma, she hasn't even been abducted. She has been taken into a trap, which was obviously a trap. Weird. But Oksa goes on her own with her friend Gus, who has no magical abilities. She has magical abilities, but she doesn't really know how to use them yet. And I don't understand why she goes there on her own, because she has a whole family of people who are supporting her and who know what's going on, but she doesn't tell anyone about what's happened. she goes there and obviously it all goes wrong, and then she has to be saved by another character, one of the adults, a member of her family, who gets the same information she had and goes to rescue her. So Oksa's role in this scenario is completely pointless. So it kind of I just thought that was a really weird ending for like a magical novel that could have been it could have been so much better. I was disappointed with Oksa Pollock. And it was kind of the opposite to the Mortal Instruments, because I really wanted to like Oksa Pollock and I hated it, and I thought I wouldn't like the Mortal Instruments, but I loved it. So, you know, you never know. There was another hugely pleasing thing about this series which I thought was so good. I love trying to spotting literary references, especially in YA novels. There are usually quite a lot of them. I remember in the Immortals series, there's a reference to, I think it's Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte quite early on. That's the only one I can think of right now. But yeah, but the thing about the Immortals series, which I didn't read, I didn't really like it, but I thought that the Wuthering Heights reference was appropriate because it's it's the story of romance, and there's this kind of weird romance thing in the Immortals. But that's usually what happens. The reference is usually something that clearly inspired the novel that's being written. In the Mortal Instruments, I found one reference, which is very subtle, but I just thought it was odd because it was taken from Catch-22 by Joseph Heller, and not anything that was kind of related to this. Catch-22 by Joseph Heller is, in my opinion, one of the best novels ever written anywhere ever, and I really do recommend everyone should read this book at least once. Everyone should read it. It should be obligatory. I think it's so good. But the main character in Catch-22 is called Yossarian, which is also the name of Simon's cat in the Mortal Instruments. And I really love that. I really love that kind of subtle reference. Simon loves to read. Simon's a big reader, so I love the way it's worked into the fact that this character, who's obviously read Catch-22, decided to call his cat after the main character. And I think that's a really good way of doing a reference, because it's not like, oh, these characters are reading this book at high school or whatever because as an author, the author read that book and inspired this story. But this is actually putting it on the back of one of the characters, which I thought was a really brilliant way of doing that. She is good at naming cats, Cassandra Clare, because I'm useless at naming animals, but she, Magnus the Warlock, Alec's boyfriend, also has a cat who is called Chairman Meow, which I thought was also brilliant. So a big point to you, Cassandra Clare, for being so good at naming animals. So when I got to book 6, I struggled through book 6. Which kind of amused me because I also struggled through the last Harry Potter book. So I don't know if that's just a thing with series, that the last book's a bit of a struggle. But I don't know, I thought it was just odd compared to the other books. It didn't have the same kind of flow to it, and I just found it kind of boring in a way. I mean, stuff happens in it. It's not like nothing's going on, but it just didn't have the same pace. And we're also introduced to a new character called Emma, who's a 10-year-old girl, and I was disappointed with her because I imagined, it could have been interesting having a 10-year-old child as a character, because she's also a shadow hunter, and having kind of 10-year-old's view from someone who's been brought up in the shadow hunter world could have been interesting, because we've already got Jace and Izzy and Alec and some other characters who've just been living this way of life since they were born. but having a kind of child's perspective on it could have been interesting, but it really wasn't. She doesn't bring any kind of new elements to the story apart from, I guess, the thrill of having a new character, but I didn't really see the point of her at all. I don't really understand why she was there, apart from maybe to bulk out the last book a bit. It's longer than the others, but yeah, I did really struggle with it. There's also a scene between Alec and Jace where they're kind of admitting how much they admire anything. It's peculiar. And it's also cut into two parts. Like, you've got one really long dialogue that was boring, and then it's cut off, and then later on they go back to having that conversation that is still really long and boring. There was a lot of dialogue in the last book, and a lot of it was just really boring, and I struggled with it. So, to conclude this review of the entire Mortal Instruments series, my feelings on it, I thought it was really good. It's a really good YA fantasy series. I thought it was really well constructed, especially all the different kind of magical creatures that all have their own storylines, well, some of them, and all the different intrigues that surround them and subplots. So really, really well thought out, really good, really described in depth. That was a brilliant thing. Some of the characters were so good. I thought Izzy was really brilliant, and Magnus. I love Magnus's character, and he has his own book, which I'm definitely going to go and have a look at. And I want to read more about the Shadowhunters. Yeah, definitely. I have the Infernal Devices series or trilogy lined up in my Mount Everest of TBR. So I'll get round to it at some point. I definitely want to. I think it's set in the 19th century, so it's like 19th century Shadowhunters, which I think could be an interesting one. So I'd like to have a look at that. Overall, yeah, this is a pretty good series. Very good idea. I also really love the myriad of different kinds of demons that there are. Who'd have thought there were so many sorts? Which is great. All described, they all have names, they're all described in a brilliant way, they all kind of behave in a different way. A lot of work went into this, and it's well worth a read. So at the end, yeah, Cassandra Clare, congratulations on this really brilliant series, really brilliant YA fantasy series. And I completely understand why it is still loved so much to this day. So overall, definitely worth a read. So that's it for my thoughts on the Mortal Instruments series. I hope you enjoyed this. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all soon for my next review. Bye bye. And read Catch-22. You have to. It's the law. It's the law on my channel. Everyone has to read Catch-22.